Hello, this is IPostSwords, and today we're going to be revisiting a sword covered in a previous episode. The reason we're revisiting this sword is because I made some incorrect claims about the steel it was made from. When I first purchased it, I thought it was dendritic roots, but after a recent etch, it was revealed to be made out of twisted ribbon steel. This is a Turkish pala, a subset of the kilij family. Kilij is merely the Turkish word for sword, and there are many different variants. However, this style, the pala, has one very specific purpose. These swords were designed to be infantry swords that could deliver extremely devastating, effective, and fast drawing cuts. There are a few design features of this sword which make it uniquely suited to performing extremely effective draw cuts, so let's discuss them. This pala has a T-shaped spine. That means that while the edge may be in one plane, the spine is exactly perpendicular to it. The T-shaped spine on this sword allows it to have an extremely acute edge angle and be very sharp, but also allowing it to be very stiff in this direction. By having such a stiff blade with an acute edge angle, it's possible to perform very effective drawing cuts. However, it is impossible to perform an effective chopping cut with this portion of the blade, because you'll experience extreme resistance as soon as you reach the spine. You can, however, perform a chopping cut with the distal portion of the blade, as it features no spine and is extremely thin. This minimizes resistance when passing through an object. However, the lack of a spine in the distal portion and the extreme thinness at around 2 mm at the base to around 1 mm in the furthest portion of the blade means that this is a very flexible part of the blade. And being both flexible and broad, it's not particularly well suited to performing a thrusting attack. The secondary curve unique to this style of sword is the reason it's so effective at performing a draw cut. In a draw cut, the sword passes over the entire surface of the object you're cutting, increasing the amount of time that the edge is in contact with your target. This allows it to defeat textiles which are otherwise difficult to cut, including things like layered silk, which can be a problem for other sword designs. This sword has an extremely unique and well-made blade. In a recent etching video, I revealed that this sword is in fact made out of Turkish ribbon twist pattern welded steel. The Turkish ribbon twist, also referred to as a form of Damascus steel, is a pattern welding method which utilizes multiple bars stacked on top of each other and compressed. These twisted bars create a starburst shaped interaction at the edge of each bar, which gives it its distinct appearance and also makes it extremely technically challenging to produce. This made these blades exceptionally valuable. They also had a good mix of rigidity and edge retention, due to the fact that they mixed a slightly softer and a slightly harder steel. It is, however, mono-tempered. This does have a bit of springiness to it. The blade is also scarf welded. Shout out to both my previous video on scarf welding and to Matt Easton, who recently discussed scarf welded swords. A scarf weld means that the high carbon portion of the blade, in this case the elaborately pattern welded portion of the blade, has been attached to a soft iron section which comprises the fort of the blade and the tang. This was done for functional reasons, not to save precious steel. At this point, extremely complex pattern welding was possible, and they could have made the whole blade out of this sort of pattern welded steel. However, the craftsman chose to use a scarf weld in order to have a softer iron tang on this hard steel blade. This meant that in the event that this sword was used in a particularly harsh manner, it would be more likely to bend at the tang or in the fort than break. This was far easier to repair than if the sword were to break and could have saved your life. You can still parry with a bent sword. You cannot parry with a broken sword. And on the topic of use, this does have evidence of edge use. In fact, the patina inside this indicates that it was done hundreds of years ago. This sword has a very typical hilt for a kilij. It features horn grip scales and a copper alloy crossguard, which features langets that extend both into the grip and into the sword. The langets on the bladed portion of the sword are used to grab onto the top of the scabbard in order to prevent a sword from falling out of the scabbard and hold onto it a bit better. although it's arguable that with a blade this curved, it's a little bit redundant, as this isn't coming out of a scabbard unless you tug on it fairly hard. This sword balances relatively far from the hilt, being around 18 centimeters from the crossguard. However, it is light overall at 673 grams. The sword is only 79 centimeters in total length, with a blade length of 66 centimeters. This means that while it balances relatively far from the hilt, it is an extremely light, maneuverable, and fast sword. It's quick to cut with and quick to recover from. This sword is therefore extremely well designed and well made for its purpose, this being an infantry sword designed to cut through textiles and produce fast, devastating draw cuts. It's different from the traditional cavalry kilij, which extends back in history to the 15th century. It doesn't have fullers and instead uses a T-shaped spine. And even the Yelman, the back edge of this sword, isn't sharpened like a traditional kilij would be. There are therefore extreme differences between the classic kilij and the pala, which you have to bear in mind if you're a collector of swords like these. It can be easy to assume a sword is an earlier kilij based off just the profile if you don't know the geometry of the sword. This has been a quick video looking at one of my most interesting swords, a pattern welded pala from Ottoman Turkey around 1780. I hope you've enjoyed the video because that's all I've got for you today. Until next time, stay sharp.